goodness. You are such an inspiration.
Wow, you really are.
You're so strong.
Can I pet your service dog?
Ugh. 1, 2, 3, let's go! We are artists, parents, teachers, good guys, bad guys, students, leaders. I'm not your inspiration, yeah, I'm fully who I am. Got my own expectations that don't fit into your plans. I'm not your sad story, so I wrote it in this song. Everything you know about disability is wrong. Yeah, everything you know. Yeah, everything you know about disability is wrong.
Hey listeners, welcome back to another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong.
Today we have on the show Pamela Schuller, who's a globally recognized disability and mental health advocate and professional stand-up comedian. Pamela seamlessly blends her narrative through her comedy and actionable tips and tools of a seasoned educator. Her humor resonates with audiences from youth to corporate C-suites.
Pamela has addressed international audiences and clients in every state in the U.S., reaching over 100,000 plus children, teens, and professionals. Equipped with degrees in psychology and advocacy through art, a master's in advocacy and policy, and certificates in executive coaching and DEI methods, she has translated her expertise into a repertoire that instills pride in young people and inspires innovation in corporate teams through inclusive efforts. So Pamela is all about what Easter Seals is about. Welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I always want to curl up inside myself when I hear my bio being read, but thank you for such a warm intro.
I know. We always tell our guests, we're like, well, we're going to read it because it makes us sound cool because you are very cool. So I want to read the whole bio, but I know I would be doing the same thing.
That's where I have you fooled. I'm not cool. I'm excited to be here though.
Okay, well, you fooled us well because we are geeked to have you on the show today. We have wanted you on for a while. We both are fans of your comedy. Aaron introduced me to your stuff, and I love it. Before we get into the meat of the interview, let's go ahead and do our audio descriptions, which is a description of what we look like visually for our blind or low vision audience. And I can get us started there. This is Lily speaking. I am a 27-year-old woman. I am mixed race, white passing, and I have I'm debuting a new hairstyle on the episode today. I officially have my dream Corella DeVille look, where half of my hair is platinum blonde and the other half is black, right down the middle, which is kind of low key in the autistic community, like the autistic hairdo. So I'm pretty happy to be a part of it. I say low key, but anyway, we'll get into that. Aaron, go ahead.
This is Erin speaking. I'm a white woman with red hair, blue eyes, and I have on a striped long sleeve shirt, and I'm in my bedroom, and it's very hot in here, and I'm sad I chose this shirt to wear.
It's very cute though.
I like this shirt.
Thank you.
Should I go?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. This is Pamela Schuller speaking. I am a white woman with blonde hair that is absolutely not natural, so you can see the roots coming in that are nice and dark brown. I'm wearing a dark blue shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a giant mirror. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Oh, and if you can't see me, I have Tourette's, so I'm often winking and making funny faces as well, which is a big part of my life.
Oh yeah, I forgot to add, thanks for sharing that, because I'm wearing the fidget necklace that I always wear, and I will fidget it with it. And then if you've been listening, my new favorite stim toy that's been in lots of episodes, I'll be playing with my little acupuncture rings. Oh, I'm obsessed. We're not sponsored by this brand. I wish we were. They're just little rings, and it's like kind of sharp. So it really helps me with like sensory input, and it's my new favorite thing. Was gonna say before we dive in on the questions, I have so much respect for people who are not natural blonde that have blonde hair now that I've done the half and half dye. This is a lot of maintenance.
It's a lot of work. Mine are highlights, so like I don't have to go quite as often. But just today I texted my mother in Ohio and said, do you know of like a good blonde highlighter in Ohio? Because it is astronomically expensive in New York City.
Oh yeah, if you're gonna go blonde, I feel like you got to have a hairdresser friend that you can do some kind of trades with.
I
My creative
know.
partner, I'm so lucky in life. The person I make short films with is an amazing hairstylist, so she does my hair, and we'll like while we're talking about stuff.
So smart. That's the next move.
Yeah, trade. You got to get back into trade culture because everything is too expensive right now.
Yes.
All right. Well, now that we've covered the important stuff like dyeing your hair and our favorite fidgets, let's get into it. Erin, you want to take us away with our starting question?
Sure. So our podcast is everything you know about disability is wrong. So our first question to all our guests is, what do people get wrong about you?
Ooh, about me or about Tourette's? So often I'll tell someone I have Tourette syndrome and they say something like, great, let her rip if you need to yell all the bad words. And I always like to say something like, I do, but not from Tourette's. In reality, out of every like 5 people with Tourette's, only 1 has an additional diagnosis of yelling words or phrases or repeating things. I did have that growing up, but I always like to be clear that at this point in my life, Tourette's is more kind of chronic pain. It's doing the same movements over and over. I still make noises like I hiss and I, cough a bunch and things like that are Tourette's. But at this point in my life, what I'm really dealing with is the kind of the chronic pain from doing the same movements hard over and over and over again. But I've even had doctors say, oh, so you yell bad words. Like, yeah, for fun, babe.
Man, the doctor aspect always makes us feel so like validated in the title of this podcast when it's like people who have spent, my sister's a doctor, so I know just how much schooling you go into, and to go through that much schooling and still just know nothing about disability is always quite telling of how much we lack disability education.
My gosh, if you're a school listening in on this, especially not like, let's do a class, do a program, have a speaker come in. I know a few.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I had never heard it explained like that chronic pain that makes so much sense though with the repetitive movements.
Well, everyone with Tourette's does repetitive movements and noises that last a certain amount of time, but not everyone yells cuss words. And yet that's the piece the media kind of latched onto.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I wonder how that media portrayal became what it is, because I feel like, yeah, that really is the way. It's like the verbal is what I've always kind of thought of.
The sensational piece, right? Like South Beach, everyone, that's the sensational piece. So I get it a little bit. Like if you've got people who are uncontrollably yelling things, that's what the media is going to pick up on. That's a lot of the stories. That's the TV characters. But we're doing a little better these days. We're pushing it.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the like how we're seeing a uptick in diagnoses for autistic women, because we're realizing that like women socially haven't really been allowed to do the things that were the obvious stereotypical markers of autism, especially when you think about like Black and brown women. They're not like, that's not the young white male screaming holding a train toy is not going to be an accurate representation, and that's interesting that plays into Tourette's as well. Okay, so you kind of mentioned that you at one point were doing things like that, and I've seen written on either like your website or where there's bios anywhere that you were once diagnosed with one of the most severe cases of Tourette syndrome in the country. And I have to know who said those words to you and what was that like? Because as someone who's been given many diagnoses, to have a doctor say something like that would be intense.
Yeah, and I feel like there should be some kind of award on a mantle, right? Don't we feel like I deserve some kind of trophy? So that comment came from, at one point, my Tourette's was so severe. And I always like to clarify, because I think people have this perception of me that I don't have it anymore, or that I've like overcome it. I have not. I still tic constantly. I still have emergencies where, I break things from Tourette's. That is very much a part of my life. But as a kid, I would do these really aggressive, big physical movements over and over and over again, nonstop. So like I threw my head back so hard and so many times I broke my own neck. I tensed my stomach muscles so hard I ruptured my own appendix. So years ago, when I was probably like middle school is really when it was middle school, but I don't remember exactly when that comment happened. I had a team of doctors in Chicago, oh gosh, I have to remember all of the hospitals. Cleveland Clinic, Chicago, and one other major hospital were all working on my case. So the biggest kind of neurology programs in the country all had their head neurologist meeting about my case to try to figure it out. And so that's where that comment came from, that all three of the major and I'm, it doesn't mean there wasn't someone who had it worse, but all three of the biggest kind of neurology programs at the time were meeting, and they had never seen a case like mine. I was in the hospital because of broken bones, and that's where the comment came from, that none of them had seen or heard. And like they all went to conferences, and I was the case they were talking about.
Wow, that's so interesting. Were there like therapies you went through or anything? Like, what was the pathway that led to no longer causing harm?
So I still do. There's still harm from ticks. A few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I ticked my hand so hard my pinky came out of the socket. I regularly am still in occupational therapy. It very much is still, I still have injuries. I think I have fewer, and it's kind of less aggressive in how hard I tick for a few reasons. A lot of people in their mid to late 20s, when puberty finally finishes, our ticks shift or calm down. For me, they calm down in kind of how aggressive they often were. I still have a severe case of Tourette's. So that's one piece that happened kind of mid 20s. I also, for so many years of my life, I was trying to hold Tourette's back. Like I have a number of diagnoses. I have OCD, ADHD, Tourette's. I'm of short stature. And I wanted so badly, I think, to come across as, and I hate this word now, but as an adolescent, normal. I wanted to appear normal. And so I was constantly holding Tourette's back. And with Tourette's, for most of us, when you hold it back, it gets worse. So I also had a rough home life. A lot going on. So it's unclear why it shifted a little bit for me. At this point, my meds for Tourette's are just Botox for Tourette's, which does dull the muscles. So I get Botox for Tourette's, a lot of occupational therapy, real therapy, a neurologist I know and love. So some combination of all of those things.
Yeah, totally. I love your journey into comedy, specifically, like as a way to sort of manage your disability and the ways people understand it or don't understand it. So, at what point in your journey did you end up relying on comedy?
So I ended up I like to use the word shipped away to what I call weird kid boarding school, which was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, because it was just a place that was like, you do you, and like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to get creative. We're going to put you in arts. Whoever you are is welcome, and we're going to push you, and we're going to celebrate you. And boarding school, first of all, I had the most attention ever earned at the history of the school because I was an asshole. Like I was so snarky and so funny, and none of it was channeled yet. And they were the ones that put me in stand up. And I loved it right away. It became at first a coping mechanism and an outlet. And then over time, I realized I kind of have to process things off stage. I can do it in comedy writing. I can do it in therapy. I can do it, but I have to have processed before it goes on stage, right? Like comedy, stand-up isn't therapy. Therapy is therapy. Stand-up is fun and where I get to do some education, absolutely. But in a live show, you never know what someone's going to say back to you. And if there's a chance it's going to hurt your feelings, you need to have processed off stage. So boarding school were the ones that initially put me in stand-up. And oh my gosh, there's so many jokes I hope never see the light of day. Because as a 16-year-old who was wildly inappropriate, I was crossing lines. I was, creating jokes that were not socially acceptable, that probably in this day and age could get me canceled. But I think especially as a kid, that was part of it. I had to find my voice. I had to find, where is it humor and where is it harmful and hurtful? And that was a big part of my journey.
Yeah, I do stand up as well, and I feel so grateful to have grown up just before footage of your teens followed you forever, because I feel for young comedians who are trying to find their voice and trying to find what their line is and it's all being immortalized. And there's just that like pressure. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think that um it's really important to be able to be like, my jokes have grown, I'm not doing that anymore. And it is necessary to kind of push those lines, especially if you are using humor to kind of understand what's going on with you. I know that for me, humor was absolutely because mental illness was just such a serious part of my life, that it was like, I have to be able to laugh about this or it's going to take over everything.
Yeah. I, for years, like to share the story that like I didn't have any jokes about my dad dying because no part of it felt funny. And it wasn't until years after he died where I was doing stand up and I was like, no, it's not funny he died, but things people said to me about my dad dying are funny. Like there are things about it that are humorous. He died on Valentine's Day, such a quick way to ruin the holiday. And so one year I just started writing a bunch of jokes and I was like, I'm going to go do stand up about my dad dying on Valentine's Day. And because I had waited long enough, it felt cathartic and not as much like an open wound or like I was making fun of the fact that he died. No, I was like finding humor in my experiences. And that I think was that shift actually allowed me to then think about how I talk about disability a little bit differently as well.
That makes sense. And I appreciate what you said about the therapy is therapy. You have to process things, because there's also a level of like, if you're going to talk about something that's going to cause that little bit of discomfort, I think your audience, to be able to enjoy it, needs to be able to trust that you've got it. Like you're holding it up there. The second that, and I've been in comedy rooms where the second that you're in the audience and you start to feel like, I feel like I'm watching this comedian harm themselves. Like I think that they're talking about things that they're not ready to be talking about, then you lose your audience. And so it is so important to know you're ready to broach topics first. So I'm glad you waited until you were ready to
And it
laugh
doesn't
about
mean
it.
you can't be vulnerable on stage and all of that, but I think there's like a line that the audience can often feel, and you just nailed it. Exactly.
How do you strike that balance between making people laugh and like delivering more serious content?
I don't think anyone gets it perfect. I think that's where to start. I think it's trial and error some of the time. And there's a difference between my stand up and my like what I tour with, which is comedy and storytelling about disability and mental health. There's similarities as well. But there's when I'm on tour and I'm working with companies and colleges, there's a goal. The goal is to make them laugh and to help them learn. And the goal is always a little bit different. For colleges, it's often like the goal is like, we all have something. What does it look like to love the hard stuff about you? At companies, the goal is often, how do we make this workplace more inclusive and accessible, but teaching about it through a way that's slightly different. And with typical stand-up at a bar in New York at 10 p.m. or a club, it's make people laugh. And so I think some of that line is, what is the goal of what I'm about to do? And then I go from there.
How did you make that jump from like pure stand-up to the more like storytelling, and how did you start touring with that?
Accidentally. I made the jump accidentally. I have been doing stand up since high school and was like getting asked to speak at medical events about having Tourette's and schools about having Tourette's. And in my mind, those were separate, right? Talking about my disability was not stand up. These are separate. And then I was asked to give it was a TEDx talk. It was like a specific brand of a TEDx talk. And they gave me a coach, and I wrote a serious talk because that's what the coach thought thought disability needed, a serious TEDx talk. And about a week before it, I had a meltdown and I was like, this doesn't feel authentic. Like even in serious talks, I want to pull some humor and I want to pull stories in. There's a way to make levity and funny moments in a serious talk. And so I rewrote the entire thing and told nobody and only rehearsed it for my sister's dog and gave the talk. And I watched the audience laugh and cry in a 13-minute talk. And someone came up after me and said, get your ducks in order because this is about to be a career for you. And I was like, no, but just in case, I turned that 13-minute talk into a half hour and then I think 45 minutes. And sure enough, when that came out, it did well. And people started asking me to come speak. I started charging little bits amount of money. And that was like 10 years ago. And I kept building it. At first it was, just religious organizations, and then high schools, and then colleges, and then companies. And it kind of just kept saying yes. Like, yeah, I can rewrite a keynote to be for this. Yeah, I can teach to that. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, I got some degrees and additional, master's degrees, and kind of started combining all of that. So it was an accident, as is most of the great things in my life, where I'm just like, yeah, okay, that sounds fun.
I love that. Do you have like a favorite since that's a wide range of audiences you're performing for? Do you have a favorite target audience?
No, I like anything that feels a little bit like a challenge. I'm probably one of the only comedians who like loves middle school audiences, though, like loves it. And when people ask me, for a while, I was like, I don't know why I like it so much. And then I realized, because the default is they hate you. Like, they don't want a speaker. They don't want you to be there. And there's something so beautiful about like, there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
Like, and if you win a group of hundreds of middle schoolers or high school students over, it feels so cool. Right? Like, I don't know. I recently did a corporate gig, and I realized I knew the guy that booked me. I was like, we've worked together before. When he was in high school, I performed at his youth organization. He then got me booked at his college when he was in college and was on the booking board, like the union board. And then at his company, when they needed a speaker on disability, he recommended me. And I was like, oh my, do I owe my career to you, sir? Like, you're my hype man. I'm now his hype woman. So that there's like something really cool about when you do a good show and they like you when they're in middle school and high school, they become a part of your little tribe.
Absolutely. I feel like there's also a level of like, when you win over that middle school audience. So I don't have Tourette's, but I was misdiagnosed with Tourette's because I would stim in middle school in a way that doctors assumed was Tourette's. And now that we're talking about it, I'm sure I'm going to start doing it more.
Yeah, also, if you can buy people that have tics often like play off of each other's accidentally. So anything you do, I will also start doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because it's such a, I always feel like I'm like imposter syndrome in my own uncontrollable body movements when someone else will be like moving in a way that's like moving their neck, and I'm immediately doing this, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I promise I'm not making fun of you. Right. This is what my body does. And so for me, mine's mainly in neck and shoulders, which is why I was so like, of course, when you brought up the chronic pain part of this, because that's also where 90% of my chronic pain is. And that makes sense because I'm messing with the muscles all the time. I never really put that together in my brain. But not being in control of your body as a middle schooler going through middle school, which is the time when normally you're not in control of your body because it's training so much. There's just ample opportunity to be bullied and to feel unwelcome. And so I wonder, is there some kind of like healing nature to be able to be in front of middle schoolers and talk about, like, be at a place, be where you are now with your acceptance of your identity, performing in front of people who are at the age where you maybe didn't accept yourself?
Yeah, I feel like that's where I make real, like, companies. I do feel like I'm making change. I love it. I love working with them. But there's like every time I do a middle school or high school show, I think I get healed a little bit more from those days, and that's different. There's often a moment after a show for students where they, like, at the end, where they all come to like talk to me, and there's this like sea of students who they all don't have Tourette's, but they've all felt different. They've all felt maybe bullied or made fun of, or like they don't add anything to this world, or they don't, purpose is something they're thinking about. They're grappling with these big issues, and suddenly an adult who is different, who has owned it and found humor in it and made a living doing it, is there getting them to laugh and feel and maybe cry and feel connected. And they all want to come talk to me. And I think that's like a really fun moment for me, because then I just I get to look in the faces of these kids who are going through the thing that I went through with different diagnoses. And they share with me, I did a school 2 weeks ago, and a kid stayed after, and he just wanted to show me his art. And, I knew that he's going through stuff, you could tell, but he just wanted to share that with me. Those are the moments. Or like after a show for middle school or high school students, I lay in bed and I open the other folder on Instagram messages, and I just get to see the things they've sent me. And I do my best to respond to all of them. If you have come to a show, I will respond. It might be 2 sentences, but it might be like, I loved meeting you. I can't wait to see your art, in galleries. Like I try to remember what that kid shared with me so that I can like have a moment and reflect it back to them. And it's someone once did that for me, and I will remember it always. So I'm sure I don't have that effect on every kid, but if I can have it on a few, worth it.
That was gonna be my follow-up, was asking that, like, did you have that moment?
I had one as a kid. I had a few, I'm sure, but there's one moment that I think made me feel like an artist. And I submitted a play for the Vermont Young Playwright Festival. I went to boarding school in Burlington, Vermont, and my play won. I was like one of the top 4 or whatever for the Playwright Festival. And it meant that real actors came and I got to rehearse with them for a day, and they acted out my 12-minute play. And it was like life-changing. But then the next day we went and saw a show at the theater. It was like a traveling professional group. And some of them had acted in our shows because they'd been in town. And so they got to utilize. And the lead of the show I was obsessed with. And I went up to him after the show and I asked him for his autograph. And he said, "You were the one that wrote Dinner's Ready, weren't you?" Because I bowed with the crowd and done a Q&A. And I was like, "You know who I am?" And when he signed my playbill, he wrote like, "I can't wait to work with you one day." And I remember just being like, I couldn't breathe. I was so excited that I'd just seen this man in a play and he knew my work. And that was a moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm a teen and I can make art. Like that shifted the trajectory.
That's incredible.
And I've never told that story on a podcast ever.
I'm so glad you shared it here, because it's so important. And I know there were those moments for me when it was like artists were talking openly about the things that I was trying so hard to hide. And it's so important. The next question I have that I wanted to ask you about was talking about, you discuss mental health, and mental health, I feel like in the last decade has become a lot easier to talk about. We're getting lots of content about people's mental health and things like that. But you dive into actually talking about like dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts. And that was one for me as a teen, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I was just an extraordinarily suicidal teenager. Just my brain that was its autopilot. And, I was living in a world where I was told, if you say that out loud, you're going to get sent away. Like you're going to get sent. And then there were a few comedians who, like very, very few at the time. And my friends always make fun of me because I'm so stereotypical. I loved Pete Davidson as a young 20-year-old girl, but it was because he had some stand-up bits where he was so casual about using a word that I thought if I said I was going to get locked away. And so I am just so
really
grateful.
Funny. He's
also so funny.
Yeah.
and I just applaud that you are willing to talk about things that are a little heavier. And I wonder, like, what drives you to be open about that time of your life, and what's like your favorite part of being able to talk about it now? Because I just like to bring some light to talking about a conversation that people are scared to have.
Yeah. So I don't always talk about it. It's kind of time and a place, right? Like at a corporate show, if they're wanting stuff on disability inclusion, I'm not bringing up my mental health journey. But I for years, I launched and ran a mental health program for teens where we talked about mental health through creativity. Because I think as a kid, it was taboo. It still feels taboo sometimes. I still, as an adult who is happy and loving my life, experience some suicide ideation. Every now and again, it sneaks back into my little mean brain. And when that happens, I hear it, I acknowledge it, I know that I will not act on it, and I ask for help. And I think the reason it's so important for me, and I don't think everyone has to, it's so important for me to write about it, to find humor into it, humor in it, to dive into it, is because I think the way we get rid of stigma is to get people talking about it. And not everyone wants to talk about it, but you don't have to if someone else is, right? Like we just want you to feel connected and not alone. And so there is humor in tough stuff. Like maybe not right away. I guarantee you I wasn't writing jokes as a teen where I was really suicidal at boarding school. Those jokes weren't happening then. I was writing about filthy stuff, like it was the but now that I've dealt with it and processed, I'm in a safe space. It is both healing and cathartic for me to write about it in a way that hopefully isn't super triggering. But like, gosh, sometimes my brain is really mean to me. I like, there's a few days out of every month where my brain is an asshole. She's so mean. And there's humor in that. And I also, I think safe, like to know that it's okay to acknowledge it, ask for help is I think hopefully healing some of society and hopefully allowing people to feel less alone. And I think for me, a lot of it, my mental health was connected to my disability. I felt different. I felt like, because Tourette's for a long time was loud, I was loud. I was disruptive. I wasn't always meaning to be. Now when I do it, I'm meaning to be. But as a kid, when I was barking and making noises and yelling, I felt like I took away from the world. And you internalize that.
Absolutely. And I think that there's so much power to me, I think, in saying, like, hearing even you say, I still experience that, because same. And there's like, when I look back on the times that I think I was quote unquote at my worst, it wasn't just the like suicidal ideation that was going on, but it was the judgment of that ideation, where I was so ashamed to have these kind of thoughts. And now I meet those thoughts with nothing but love, of just like, I know you're trying to help me, brain, but that's not actually going to help. So you can think about it, but it's not a viable path. And I think it goes for, I mean, like, even Erin, you talking about like anxiety and work anxiety has been so healing for me, because again, I was always having that second thought of like, why am I having the anxiety of being hunted for sport while working on a social media graphic? Like, this is not that serious. But then, Erin, you've been so willing to talk about like, yeah, I have anxiety and it hasn't gone away, that now I'm like, okay, so now I can just experience it without sending that second arrow of judging it.
I think for me, like, I used to never talk about my anxiety because I always felt like people would assume I'm anxious because I'm disabled. And I didn't want that negative, ideas about disability. So I hid it for a long time, but eventually it got to the point where I had to get help. And working at Easter Seals really allowed me to see there's nothing to be ashamed about. And it's okay if it is related to my disability, or if it isn't, it doesn't matter. That was a big step for me to get help.
I love that. And I think it's so important because sometimes I think as a society, we perceive getting help as a weakness, when in reality, oh my God, it's a strength. Like, if we have the opportunity to live a version of ourselves that's less anxious, a little less depressed, like, yes, let's ask for help and go for it. And
it definitely, like, having it be more in the public now is a huge help. And it's still a stigma, but it doesn't have to be. And I feel like having these conversations helps other people to see it's okay and just take care of yourself.
And that, like, not all people with disabilities experience anxiety or depression. They might sometimes in our lives be related, but I know so many people who, like, that's just not a part of how their brain was wired, and they have a disability. And a reminder that, like, we all live differently. We all have, that's like part of the beauty of it.
And I think it also helped me to recognize that my anxiety around my disability is more about ableism than my specific diagnosis.
That makes sense. And that makes sense of the like lived experience of, if you're facing ableism every time you're going outside, yeah, you're gonna have some anxiety about going outside. Like there's something like for me that's always healing about being like, these are logical fears I'm having, but maybe I don't have to let these fears like fully control everything I do. I trying to go back a second because I had something I wanted to say on the like getting help being seen as a weakness. I think that there's something in the like capitalist work hard society that is like, you don't want to take the easy way out. And like I think about that when it comes to like mental health medication. I'll see things online that's like, that's the easy way out. You could instead do like make these life changes. And I just want to make it clear for any listeners questioning this, I always want the easy way out. I want to live a life filled with ease. Actually, that's a dream of mine. And I know that in we had Chelsea Bear, who's an amazing content creator, on. We were talking about using like accommodations or mobility aids when you don't necessarily need it 100%, but maybe it makes life easier. Well, then do it. Like, you don't have to. There's such an odd fight through it, push through kind of mentality that can come about. So I think it's really important to note, like, even with disabilities, even in the cultural society we live in today, it is worthwhile to pursue a life of ease and comfort. You deserve that.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my brain's going in a million directions of like, yeah, sometimes my tics are so bad. I'm so tired and I feel so lazy. Yesterday, I got in bed at 7 p.m. and I stayed in bed until this morning. Like, and part of me is like, you are not pushing yourself, but sometimes it's okay to just take care of yourself. Like, we live in a society that's like, if you want to hit the peak of your career, you have to go, go, go. And it's a badge of honor to go, go, go and not take care of your mental health and not listen to your body. And I can tell you right now, as someone with, all of these things going on, if I go, 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 I'm going to stop for a long time. It's not going to be a night. Yeah.
I live my best life when I'm in bed. It's just like so relaxing and it's quiet. My family's not walking around the house being loud. I can just like chill out, and it's just great for my mental health and my physical health as well.
Yeah. Was it night cheese from 30 Rock where she eats her night cheese? Yeah, I'm going to eat some night cheese.
Yes. I actually literally this week was talking to my therapist about like, if maybe I need to up my ADHD medication because I'm noticing that I'm taking big breaks and I'm like, or right after work, I'm like just sitting on the couch doing nothing for hours. And I'm like, during that time, I could be writing more stand up, or I could be creating other things or doing these kind of things. And my amazing therapist, love her so much, was just like, why do you need to do more? Why, what is that driving you? And I was like, actually, I don't know. I just feel like there is that pressure. And I do the same thing where on days that my body's in a lot of pain, sometimes I just have to get in my bed and stay in my bed. But there is such a stigma. The word's always stigma of the like, and that pressure of like, oh, I feel lazy right now, I should be doing more.
I
But
think
what if
for me, so much is like imposter syndrome sneaking into play. There's like so many layers to this. And if I spend the night in bed being mad at myself, then it doesn't actually do what it needed to do. I got to just lean into it.
that goes into that, what I was saying earlier too, on that, like the judgment of what you're doing can often be just like almost more detrimental, in that like needing rest is not an issue, but laying in bed going, oh, I suck, is not good for me. Well, I'm glad you put yourself to bed when you needed to go to bed. I think it's
sometimes I call it a timeout. Sometimes, like walking around New York, I'll be ready to scream at strangers and I'll be like, you know what, Pam? time out. You're gonna take a time out. You're gonna hit a reset button, and maybe tomorrow you can wake up a little kinder.
Yes. And that's something I've had to realize is like translating body feelings to emotions. There is a set body feeling that I have that for most of my life I attributed to being incredibly anxious. And when I would feel it, I would try to figure out what was causing the anxiety and work through it and, just logically try to root through it. And then eventually I just had to realize, like, based on just pattern recognition of what actually made me feel better, was like, oh, that feeling is exhaustion. That feeling is just tired, actually. And so now when I feel that feeling, if my brain starts to be like, well, what's making me nervous? And I'm like, that exploration is not worthwhile. Actually, I need to go to bed. I just need to lay down. And so it's it's important to figure out when your body's telling you to get rest, because our work-based culture is, I mean, from a young age, you're taught to ignore that cue.
Push through. Yeah.
Push through for sure. Thanks for being so willing to talk about like mental health and stuff. It's my favorite topic. And I always think about young me and what it would have been like to listen to this podcast. And I think this episode would be incredibly healing.
I hope so. I love it. I'm having a great time. You're asking great questions. I talk about barking a lot. This is great. Mix it up a little.
That was kind of the goal when we made this, was, what's the when you have a disability, there tends to be one thing that gets brought up that then you talk about every time. Like for me with autism, it's late diagnosis. I'm constantly talking about being late diagnosed. I'm like, I got other cool stuff going on too. Like the late diagnosis, the barking, it's cool, but there's other things.
There's other cool things. That one, yes, is cool, but there are other cool things. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, before we run out of time, this is an Easter Seals podcast, so we love to get into the kind of Easter Seals specific topics. And thank you to Easter Seals for making this space where we can have amazing conversations like this. So Easter Seals is working for equity and access in our pillars, which are education, employment, health, transportation, and community, which are all areas of life that need equity, access, and inclusion because they're very necessary. So we have some questions written based on each of those. Is there a specific topic you'd like us to start with?
Education or transportation are the two that stood out.
All right, let's start with education, then we'll go to transportation.
Great.
Erin, you want to ask the education question?
Sure. So you're both a professional stand-up comedian and an educator. So how did you blend these two roles to deliver impactful messages, especially with corporate people and younger people?
And say that last thing again. Sorry.
And younger people and corporate. And we kind of already chatted about that, but if you have any other additional thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, identifying as an educator took a lot longer than identifying as a comedian. I felt a lot of, I'm trying to find the right word, a lot of stigma around having a disability in graduate school. I had accommodations. I had my own room for testing and extended time. And I always like to say my own room for testing was really for other people because they really struggled when I barked through an exam, but that feels like a them problem, not a me problem. I would accidentally be throwing pens because my arms are ticking so hard. And the minute you use the word test, I have all of the Tourette's, like any kind of test. It's all a doctor will be like, we're going to test you for this. And I'll be like, that, and then my own room for test or extended time, because Tourette's, when it's being timed, gets worse and it was hard to hold a pen. And I also, typed everything, and I felt a lot of pushback. I had a professor tell me that my accommodations were inconvenient for them. And I, wrote the snarkiest email back after 3 days of crying. But for 3 days, I cried over the fact that even in graduate school, my accommodations might be inconvenient for someone. And I had to go through this whole emotional journey to realize that's okay. It's okay, because we all need different things at different times to be successful. And I would sure as heck go out of my way for anyone in my world to get to be their most successful self. And like, it's okay that even as a graduate student, I require some different things. And once I realized that, first of all, I share that on stage often when I tour. And so many people are like, oh my God, I've had similar experiences, or this has happened to me. And I realize education, you're often put into a box, right? Like, even before I went to boarding school, I was put in special education, or they tried to. There was a lot of back and forth because I didn't fit into a box. I was smart and I had no control over my body and the noises that I made. And while special education is great for certain people, it wasn't the right fit for me. And we want kids and people to be in programs where it's the right fit. And I think living it and experiencing it, when I was getting degrees and performing and all of that, it was like almost organic that I started combining them into something. I also think often we teach in keynotes, in workshops, like up front, you're going to learn this information. Most of us don't learn like that. And so there's something really beautiful to walk in and be like, yeah, I'll do my keynote, but I'm going to get everyone laughing and feeling. And then we're going to learn this upside down, backwards, and sideways, which is how I would learn it. And we're going to reach the people who don't learn by a PowerPoint sitting still listening for an hour. And so that was, I don't know, fun and transformative to figure out. And now I teach the way I learn.
What a simple but so extraordinary sentence. To teach the way you learn is really, that's a good one, Pam.
Thanks.
Man, I feel like your accommodation is inconveniencing me is unfortunately a super common story, which is wild.
Yeah.
When I went to college a long time ago, I had a lot of professors who didn't see, like, obviously I need accommodations, and that's not negotiable. But younger me didn't say anything, and I just did just drastic things. Like, I changed my major to avoid an ableist professor. So, but it all worked out in the end. But today, the me of today would not have put up with that shit, at all. And part of growing up for me was learning how to stick up for myself.
Yeah, and I get so excited about podcasts like this. I hope that teens now are like, yeah.
So it also sucks that it's on us. Like, I did like a visiting professor at a university. I've done this a few times where I do like a week or 2 weeks. And my rule of thumb is that if someone asks for an accommodation, we just do it for the whole class, because chances are it's going to benefit everyone. And I think we're a little set in our ways, especially in the education system. Unlike, no, if you allow open notes for a test, people are going to use their notes. Okay, then why don't you ask it in a way that makes them grapple with the information and use their notes? Like, I don't know.
It's that curb cut effect. When you accommodate your students, you're probably making it better for the entire class. It's very important.
That just blew my mind, what you said. If someone gets an accommodation, everyone should get it. That would change the game in education. And what an incredible way to also share, how to be inclusive and make disability not something different,
We all have something. And so many kids grow up without ever getting a proper diagnosis, so they're not going to get accommodations that they need. There are school systems that don't have the money to employ someone to be doing these things. And why should we penalize them in college as they are finally learning how their brains work?
Absolutely. I think that's I get so frustrated when workplaces or educational settings are, need my documented proof of something. Because I just do you realize the privilege it took to get this documentation, how many doctors I had to see, how much school I had to miss, how much work my parents had to miss. Like, that's not these papers aren't attainable for everyone. So I really love that concept of, what if we just accommodate everyone and curb cut the classroom? That's
And
really
it still
great.
means you just have to, you change the way you do things a little bit. It doesn't mean you can do it the way you've always done it. It means you have to put some creativity in place to make sure that people are still getting the information, and we're doing it in a way that works for more people.
Absolutely. Well, I think I could talk about this for another
I know
hour.
I could
'cause
too. And
think
Erin,
it's
I have so many
cool.
follow-up questions about that professor that you switched a major for. Have you run into them ever again?
No, this was like over 20 years ago.
Do you think karma came after them?
I hope so.
I hope so.
Me too.
That's
She was
so
nasty.
wild.
She was the worst.
The worst. You ended up where you needed to be, but like just horrific that
But
someone's
of no credit to
ableism.
that professor.
Yeah, no, and someone's
Shouldn't get any
ableism
credit.
could direct someone's life so much. And also, like, yeah, if you're a professor, just ensure that you're actively trying to be inclusive, because you never know what some of the most offensive things people have said to me have, I know, been in passing, and they have not meant it as like they've not meant it in a cruel way, and then I'm sitting here ruminating over it for hours and hours, and it's why we need to be more aware of disability from a young age. Learn
When
how
I
to
work with
not be
kids, I
ableist.
call those oops, ouch. Because you didn't mean to hurt someone's feelings, but you did. And so what does
Yeah.
it look like to like learn a little bit more and do a little bit better next time?
Absolutely. I love that. I love oops ouch as a method.
I did not come up with that. That is not mine. Please no.
I've heard
I'm
oops
not
ouch
that good.
before.
Yeah, yeah.
I've heard oops ouch before with my nieces and nephews, and they're all under 5. And it is impressive, actually, the way that like I've been able to take the kind of gentle parenting approach and put that into like gentle correcting your ableism. Like, oh, you really wanted to ask that question, didn't you?
You can
Like,
that.
that's
Yeah.
that's awesome. But so before we run out of time, because I think we could take you for hours today for real. Transportation. I know you wanted to talk about that. I have the question we had prepared was that, like, I'm interested. I know you don't drive, and I'm interested in what transportation is like for you in a very car dependent country. But also, if you have other transportation points you want to bring up, we want to hear them.
I could do a whole show on traveling with, it's like traveling with a disability. Okay, so here's the thing. I technically still have a license. At one point I got a driver's license and I did not pass the test. I was in my mid-20s when I went for this, and my Tourette's was still, I was like crossing my eyes for minutes at a time. I should not have been driving. And the instructor was like, if you do one more thing wrong, I like have to fail you. And I cried and said, I have Tourette's. And he goes, so does my nephew. And then he passed me, but he used the phrase against my better judgment. And I lived in Jersey for a long time while I was first working in graduate school. And I hit a parked house. And I say that and people take a second, and it came out of nowhere. No, my car caressed the whole side of a house. I should absolutely not be driving. I'm the worst driver. It's unclear if it's Tourette's, if it's because I have ADHD and get distracted at all things shiny. I want to read every billboard. I want to read it twice, even on the highway while I'm driving. And, there's like a number of reasons why I shouldn't be behind the driver's seat for everyone's safety. But it means that as someone who tours 10 months out of the year, 9 to 10 months, I am a pro at planes and trains and buses and shuttles and Ubers. I also, by the way, see a direct correlation between when my Tourette's is worse and my Uber score goes down, which someone needs to do a whole article on. It's like a direct correlation. The times I've gotten bad scores, either one time he asked for my number and I said no, that got me a 1. But the other 2 times I was just ticking and making noises, that got me a bad score. But I think, gosh, we have so much needed in society to make this place accessible. I live in New York, in part because you don't need a car in New York City. And I have so many friends who use mobility devices or wheelchairs or have kids in strollers. And even the city, even with the subway, so while it's accessible for me, Pam, who doesn't drive, it has so far to go for my friends who use mobility aids or use wheelchairs, or my best friend who has a baby in a stroller. And I feel like I'm sometimes, the amount of creativity that goes into figuring out how to get to some of my gigs should be award winning. And I've had a few people not book me because of it, because I'm not going to say who it was, but an organization wanted to book me 3 hours from any airport. And I was like, I think I can figure it out. Like, there's a train that goes 45 minutes from you. I'll fly in, I'll get on the train, and then I'll do an Uber. It might cost a little bit more, but still about the same as renting a car. And they decided that was too much. That was too much effort for them to have to think about, even though I was booking it. So we have a ways to go.
It again plays into that, it's inconvenient narrative.
For who?
What in life is convenient? Like, yes, that's why, like, we form relationships with each other, and we, like, hire people we respect to come talk, because it's like, I'll do any inconvenient thing to be able to get you here. Like,
Right.
it's just such an odd, it really makes me feel like, oh wow, you have no one with disability in your life, or you're completely ignoring it when someone is so taken aback by inconvenience, because I'm just like, who cares? Like, let's do it. Let's be a little inconvenient for a little bit
it's going to be worth it.
Let's have the best conversation possible. Yeah, that's I'm sorry that happened to you, that they didn't book you, but I feel like you probably would have faced a lot more bullshit from them as well.
Sometimes I think it's okay to listen to what people are not saying in terms of my mental health.
Absolutely. Okay, I have one final question before we go, if you're okay with us keeping you a couple minutes.
Always
after.
down. Yes.
Okay. So thinking about community, you are good friends with one of our favorite past guests, Tina Frimmel.
We were just together last night.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. And I, as a disabled comedian, I just had to ask, like, what is it like getting to do comedy with other disabled comedians? And what is that like? Have you been able to find, like, a community of people who understand the shit you got to deal with?
Yes. And I'm friends with creatives, a lot of creatives with disabilities, not all comedians with disabilities. And being a part of just, like, the creative community of people who are, like, supportive and, like, roast each other, right? Like, where there's, like, fewer boundaries, I think, is transformative and freeing. Also, I think Tina Frimmel is one of, if not the funniest voice in the comedy world, disability or otherwise. Like, take disability out of it, her brain is so funny. Is so funny, and she's just, like, a good human. And being friends with her pushes me, because she's funnier than I am, and I am okay saying that. I hate that she's younger than me. That I struggle with. Like, come on, to catch up. But she's so funny and so brilliant, and the community of comedians and performers with stuff going on. First of all, it's like most of us. But leaning into that has been transformative and amazing and empowering, and it's given me agency. And I'm thankful for every day that I get to work with creatives who kind of own what makes them them.
It's just so many snaps for that. I just love that so much. And I think that, Erin, you'll agree that's the reason this podcast is, like, the best part of our jobs. Like, that
But
feeling.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. The, like, industry of acting and, like, TV film, we've that I'm, like, working to break into right now, and no one knows what to do with someone with Tourette's. And so that's an area where I'm now making new friends, because I want to learn from them. I want to push myself in that area and figure out, how do I advocate for myself in an industry like that? And how do I, so that's, like, the new journey. And I also love pushing myself and trying new things. So I'm literally going from this to an audition today.
Oh my God, amazing.
It's terrifying.
I hope it's amazing.
It won't be, but I'll learn.
Exactly. And I think, that's certainly an industry that is getting better when it comes to disability representation, but it still has a long way to go.
So long.
And oh my God, again, just thinking of, like, if I had been a little, like, 13-year-old me feeling like I was the worst person in the world because I was moving my neck. Getting to see a character who authentically was ticking would have been it would have been life-changing, life-affirming.
The character doesn't necessarily have to have Tourette's. Tics and twitches show up all of the time. Let me just be a nervous character.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. When I was in acting school, it was so much of it was me just like shoving down everything authentic about myself to try to be real. And that makes bad scenes.
Yeah.
Like,
in an audition 2 weeks ago, it was live. And I said, listen, I just want to make sure you know I have Tourette's. It's not super active today, but it often is. It would be on camera. And I was like, I can always lean into it. I can't lean away from it.
that's a good phrase just to have in general. I can lean into this. I cannot lean away. I love that. Thank you for spending an hour of your day with us, being in community with us today. This was truly incredible. Erin, any closing words? I know this was an episode you were very excited for.
Yes. I'm a big fan. I mentioned that before.
I'm a big fan of both of you.
Oh, thanks. No, but thank you for being so open and honest. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you for being on our show. Thank you, Tina, for recommending you to be on our show and giving us your contact information.
I love that girl.
Oh, we do too. We love both of you. I feel like the coolest little Chicago comedian ever, and I know two of the funniest New York comedians now. And again, disability aside, I just think both of you are clever, just clever people. Makes so much sense that you two are friends. But yeah, thank you so much for being on today, for having this incredible conversation. Erin, thank you for hosting with me. I love it so much. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you to Easter Seals. And we will see you next time on another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong.
If you liked what you heard, go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you to our listeners, and as always, thank you to Easter Seals for giving us the space and resources to share such authentic conversations from within the disability community to our listeners.
And we'll see you next time for another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong.
Everything you know about disability is wrong.
This is a podcast brought to you by Easter Seals.
You know, we actually work for Easter Seals, but maybe our listeners don't know what we do.
That's true. Easter Seals is leading the way to full access, equity, and inclusion for disabled people and their families.
And did you know we've been doing this for more than a century?
This includes helping disabled people find meaningful employment and addressing healthcare needs for all ages.
We're proud to serve communities across the country and ready for the next 100 years. For more, check out easterseals.com.